From the virtual newsroom of ImpactAlpha, this is your Impact Briefing for Friday, July 30th. I'm Monique Aiken. Today, I'm joined by ImpactAlpha's David Bank. Hello, David.
Hi, Monique. Greetings from South Carolina, where I have family. I know you do too. I've been down here all week, and I've met some fascinating people. I'm looking forward to sharing my conversation with one of them, a Miss Gardenia Simmons-White.
Well, I'm eager to meet her. And we'll also hear about Black Philanthropy Month, starting next week, from Renee Joslyn, founder of Philanthropy Unbound. But first, here's what you need to know from the week in impact investing. It was a big week for big climate funds. TPG Rise, with help from former U.S. Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, raised $5.4 billion toward a targeted $7 billion in growth equity for ventures in clean energy, decarbonized transport, agriculture, and natural solutions. Brookfield enlisted former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney to raise $7 billion on their way to a $12.5 billion fund to transform carbon-intensive businesses. Firms have already closed on more climate funds in 2021 than in the last 5 years combined. Another big private equity player, KKR, took a minority stake in Sol Systems, a community renewable energy platform in Washington, D.C. Sol's impact power purchase agreements link solar projects with community investment, habitat restoration, and job creation. KKR is committing up to $1 billion for shovel-ready projects. And it's not just the big funds. In India, Sumanati is floating a green bond to help the country's farmer-producer organizations adopt climate-resilient farming practices. In Nigeria, CrossBoundary is backing PowerGen to develop a network of more than 24 mini-grids to serve more than 50,000 people. And in Chile, the plant-based food producer Notco raised $235 million for its plant-based alternatives to milk, ice cream, burgers, and mayonnaise. Companies and investors across Asia, Africa, and Latin America are finding competitive advantage in sustainability and ESG. A trio of guest posts on ImpactAlpha explored the trends. ImpactAlpha subscribers got all of these stories and more in their email each day this week. Hello, David. So, tell us what's going on in South Carolina.
Well, Monique, your Reconstruction podcast got me so fascinated by the history of the original Reconstruction. And really, the starting point of that is here in South Carolina's Low Country with something called the Port Royal Experiment. So I've been down in Port Royal and the Sea Islands poking around a bit. It turns out it was only 7 months after the beginning of the Civil War, November 1861, the Union Army retook the Sea Islands and freed about 10,000 formerly enslaved people. The plantation owners fled, the army took the land for non-payment of taxes, and they sold it to the former enslaved people. Because of the isolation of the islands here, the Gullah Geechee culture was quite strong, and the Port Royal Experiment created schools and hospitals, and the whole area really became a seedbed for kind of a multiracial economy. While the rest of the Civil War was still going on, the center of it was something called the Penn School on St. Helena Island. It's now called the Penn Center, and it's really become one of the most important kind of touchstones of the whole era and the whole history. We met a woman there named Miss Gardenia Simmons-White, who was a student at the Penn School, one of the last graduating classes there in 1952.
Oh, we call it sacred. We call it, you're on holy ground, you're on sacred land, because this was where you had the very first school for the newly freed enslaved people so they could get an education. You are at Penn Center, which formerly Penn School, which was the very first school for the newly freed enslaved people. It started in 1862 by a Unitarian and a Quaker. They were abolitionists, and they were sent by the Freedmen's Bureau to educate the newly freed enslaved people. Now, Penn School started in one of the sharecroppers' living room with 9 students. When they outgrew that, because everybody was thirsty for knowledge, they went to Brick Church, which was built in 1855, and that was the second part of Penn School.
Built by slaves, enslaved people?
Brick Church was built by slaves, yes. 1855. We are in the center of St. Helena Island. So it's called a corner, so this is where we are, and everything is centralized here.
And St. Helena Island is part of the Sea Islands and part of the Gullah Geechee community.
Okay, this is interesting because St. Helena Island was, when the slaves were, it was predominantly African American. There were about 10,000 African American when the slaves were freed. Now it's really mixed. You have multicultural people here on St. Helena Island. But here on this island, most of the black people own their own land. So we're still independent, and we're self-sufficient and have businesses, etc. We have all of that here on St. Helena Island. So this is a good place to be.
What was interesting to me partly was that this area has made the Reconstruction kind of the center of its tourist trade. A few years ago, Congress established the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, which stretches from Wilmington, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida. And there's the Reconstruction Era National Historical Monument, basically a national park, which has offices both at the Penn Center and in Beaufort, South Carolina. The big issue, of course, is still land and land ownership, and it's been chipped away from Black families for decades as, development and golf courses have taken over islands like Hilton Head.
We would not like to see that here on St. Helena Island. We'd like to have input in what's going on with the property here. For instance, they're building another bridge at Hilton Head, and they're displacing families who've been there for years. So these are the kinds of things that we ask for. That's how we're losing our property. So Penn still is in the position of, they have a commission that they are talking about the land preservation still. So a person can pay a small portion, but at least they will get their land. Their land won't be lost. So those are things that's being worked on right now.
Seems like a very powerful experience to be there in person.
It really was, Monique. And the other thing that struck me was, the Reconstruction survived longer in this area than in many other places. There was really Black political power through, I think, about 1895 when the new Constitution was adopted and cut back voting rights and really, the backlash, was in full force by then. But it really was an experiment.
And everything's new again with voting rights under pressure today. And as we think about our Reconstruction podcast, we spoke to Renee Joslyn, the founder of Philanthropy Unbound. And it was Renee who introduced me to Black Philanthropy Month, as I mentioned at the top. The 10th anniversary of this celebration begins on Sunday. Renee and I talked about how Philanthropy Unbound can put humanity back into investing in all its forms.
And the root word, and actually the meaning of philanthropy, is really love of humankind. And so philanthropy needs to be unbound from this premise that we've put on it, that it's only mainstream large institutions that get to give love to humankind. Now, all of a sudden, people are having aha moments now, but with these aha moments, the opportunity now is to say, oh, I need to invest differently. I need to pay attention. I need to make sure that what I'm doing is comprehensive, and I need to make sure that it could actually support sustainable institutions and not just say, hey, I gave that organization $1 million. So what?
That's going to do it for your Impact Briefing this week. More all day at ImpactAlpha.com. Thank you, David, and thanks to our producer, Isaac Silk. Subscribe to get full access to the site and the daily brief. Right now, we're offering podcast listeners $100 off their first subscription. Go to ImpactAlpha.com/subscribe and use the code Briefing100. Thank you for listening. I'm Monique Aiken, Managing Director for TIP, the Investment Integration Project. Make sure to check back for next week's briefing, and until then, take care.